Welcome to Tech Digest for January 15th. So to get started, um, we talking about every engineer's dream scenario. A massive boost from a tiny code change. So QuestDB, and it's a time series database. They released a fascinating engineering blog post today detailing how they closed 400x performance gap using just 40 lines of code. So the issue came down to the native call in Java that was significantly slower than expected when measuring thread CPU time. It's a real classic reminder that sometimes the bottleneck isn't in the complex algorithms, but just seemingly innocent system calls you take for granted. So if you're into JVM internals or low-level optimization, this is a must-read. Next up, if you're running LLMs in production, you know that inference costs are the enemy. So the team over at vLLM just dropped some benchmarks that are frankly ridiculous. They're hitting over 2,000 tokens per second on H200 hardware for the DeepSeek model. They achieved this using a technique called wide app or YDP, basically optimizing how the expert parallelism works across the nodes. This is huge for anyone trying to scale open source models without breaking the bank on GPU compute. It looks like the gap between proprietary model serving and self-hosted is closing pretty fast. Um, Here's a weird technical quirk that might bite you if you're building dev tools. It turns out that every object in GitHub actually has two IDs. You probably know the standard Git SHA, but there's also internal database ID that GitHub uses in their API. So folks at Greptile wrote up a post explaining why this matters. Essentially, relying solely on one or the other can lead to some nasty sync bugs if you build integrations. This is a great deep dive into the leaky abstractions of massive platforms that we use every day. This is not the first time people discover this. So the first mobile client for GitHub also had to discover this pattern that GitHub uses. Um, Moving on to a more serious note, Google had to pull back some of its AI generated health summaries. And an investigation found that the model was hallucinating medical advice that was described as dangerous. So this is a critical reminder for anyone building RAG systems or deploying Gen AI in high stakes environment, like health environment. Accuracy isn't just a metric here; it's a safety requirement. So the community is definitely talking about how we validate those models before they hit production, especially in healthcare. In security news, we see a nightmare scenario for game developers. A bad actor managed to hijack characters in Apex Legends during live matches, literally taking control of players remotely. While this sounds like a gaming story, the technical implication is pretty terrifying. It suggests a remote code execution vulnerability in the game client or server logic. So for security researchers, this is prime example of why input validation and safety matter, um, even in the entertainment software. And of course, the scary part, this can potentially run code on your machine. Um, So, moving on, how do you store a snapshot of entire internet without going broke? So the team at Exa.ai just open sourced their architecture for ExaD. They're using S3 as primary data store, but with a clever twist on indexing to keep latency low. So it's a fascinating look at the extreme scale data engineering. They discuss the trade-offs between cost, retrieval speed, and data consistency. If you're designing data lakes or large-scale storage systems, their architecture diagrams alone are worth a click. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay. Um, Moving on. If you're tired of the usual suspects like Python or Go, check out Gleam. It's a type safe language that runs on the Erlang VM. Um, so it's been gaining traction lately because it gives you the fault tolerance of Erlang with model Rust-like syntax. Um, it's hitting front page again today, which usually means a new release or a surge in adoption. So if you build distributed systems and crave better type safety than Elixir offers, Gleam might be the next favorite tool. Um, More good news for data infrastructure. Databricks um, has open sourced um, Dicer, their internal auto sharding tool. Um, so sharding databases is usually a manual nightmare. And you have to do it ahead of time. But Dicer automates the distribution of data based on access patterns. So this is a kind of boring infrastructure tech that saves thousands of engineering hours. It's a great proprietary optimization. Great to see a proprietary optimization tools like this making their way into public domain. Um, so that's pretty cool. Um, so yeah, in MySQL we have Vitess, of course, which is used pretty widely. But so this is from Databricks now. That's a different backend, of course. Let's switch gears to hardware. If you love the idea of teenage engineering devices but want something open source, check out Tulip Creative Computer. So it's a portable, dedicated Python computer with a gorgeous display and mechanical keys. It's designed entirely for music and coding. It uses ESP32S3, so it's hackable right down to the metal, and it's a perfect weekend project if you have a 3D printer and a soldering iron. Um, yeah, that's cool. So you can, this is programmable music going on in there. Yeah, there we go. That's a nice case, especially for ESP32. Okay, so finally, thought-provoking piece on hardware sustainability. So the argument is simple. When a company declares hardware end of life and stops supporting it, they should be morally or legally obligated to open source the firmware. This would prevent millions of perfectly good devices from becoming e-waste just because the cloud server was turned off. So it's a policy argument here. But one that hits home for any engineer who hates seeing good tech die. I will see you next time. Thank you.